It's a narrative often of moral outrage. It's a narrative of the moral injustice done to a people. It's the narrative of moral rights that must be conferred to a people, and some of their victory. And that may all be the case, but it cannot be the sole purpose and the sole case. And often the plight of the Palestinians have been the well from which many drink and many draw. Sometimes the extremists have been drawing from that well of discontent, the well of oppression, and a respected Abrahamic faith. Even if they make it impossible for us, we need to maintain our humanity in understanding how we lead a people, so that we don't go up against a religion that Allah has revealed, but we go up against an oppressive system that may be in place. Judaism has become a religion that has often compromised its values, such as collective punishment and detention without trial, exclusion and exile, when they have a history of exclusion and exile, and have embraced victimhood rather than agency for their actions. And they have traded morality for politics and ethics for security. And all of this has been etched into the soul of every Muslim and every freedom-loving person in the world. But we who love justice, we who want to see freedom, we who want to see the erosion and the destruction of oppression in that part of the world, may not have any moral persuasion over the oppressor in that area or the backers of the oppressors. But we do have the responsibility to exercise persuasion over the oppressed, and to give advice to the oppressed, and to contribute to the thinking and the strategies that may be emerging from the oppressed. And it's in that regard that I was moved when I read a translation of Edward Said's weekly article in the Al-Ahram Weekly in 2001. Edward Said had been invited by the then Minister of Education, Kader Asmal, to be the keynote speaker at the Values in Education conference held in Cape Town. He went back from this and he said, Nelson Mandela always has something gripping to say, because Nelson Mandela opened the conference. This time, Edward Said says, it was two phrases that struck me. He reminded the audience, our struggle is not over, even though, and Edward Said says, here is the first phrase, the campaign against apartheid was one of the great moral struggles that captured the world's imagination. The second phrase, Edward Said says, was that the anti-apartheid campaign was not simply a movement to end racial discrimination, but was a means for all of us to assert our common humanity. It was a moral struggle that captured the moral imagination of the world, and it was a struggle to assert the common humanity, even of those who forfeit their humanity in the act of oppression. And he says in Al-Ahram, the first phrase struck me cruelly. Why did the Palestinian struggle not yet capture the world's imagination? And why, even more to the point, does it not appear as a great moral struggle receiving almost universal support? We have no doubt that it is a moral struggle. The question, Edward Said says, why has it not gripped universally the moral imagination of the world? And it is in trying to understand this that I want to really reflect on, because we cannot go from one Quds day to another, from one outrage to another, from one atrocity to another, saying the same pious things all the time and not making an impact on the world. If indeed that is a sign of madness and futility, we need to be able to put on our thinking caps and wonder out loud, what is the strategic path forward? Palestinian objective, not simply one for Palestinian freedom and statehood, but a means for all of us, all Palestinians, all involved, to assert a common humanity, then we may need to consider, and I only want to isolate 5 things. We may want to consider the urgent and important need for an uplifting, common and moral vision for Palestinians. It cannot be just a vision based on what and who we are against, nor can it be reduced to a real estate debate about 1 state or 2 states. But unraveling the Palestinian vision is sometimes an exercise in navigating theses, ideologies, fractions and factions, because we often adhere to the faction and the organization that appeals most to us, rather than finding within that a common vision other than that they must be freed from oppression. What is the message that we all hold on to that can unite Palestinians and unite all people who have sympathy, support and are in solidarity with the Palestinians? Importantly, can a vision include the idea that the other is here to stay? The second strategic challenge is often the one that moral ends require moral means. In South Africa, we were painfully aware that we cannot mobilize race if our objective is non-racialism. And it did not stop us from mounting campaigns and actions that were also designed to be inclusive. Israel especially has developed with a sympathetic media, with a sympathetic West, with the backers of superpowers, has developed the capacity to add anything resembling Palestinian atrocity against them to their historic shopping cart of victimhood. And so the ability to punish Palestinian action has been debilitating. Also, Israel has garnered unprecedented strength on the military terrain and would love the military terrain to be the preferred terrain for confronting the Palestinians and ensuring their wipeout on this earth. It's like a game of rugby. If your strengths are in the backs, you keep contact with the forwards, very minimal. You play the ball to your strengths. Edward Said said that he looked at the South African use of political and cultural struggle, in which the Freedom Charter elevated the liberation movements of South Africa above their oppressors by adopting, for example, the key principles of the Declaration of Human Rights. The argument is, how do we transcend, go beyond the known, that which we've done and that we know so well? How do we transcend military violent campaigns, which is the preferred strength of the Israeli regime? How do we transcend the perpetual reliance on the Arab states, who have proven only to look after their own interests and to sacrifice whatever values